Welcome. Color matters. Let's go back and see what we did. So here's week 1. We just took a very simplified look at primary colors. And we discovered that we can have yellow, or red, or blue. And that it's not that simple. That color is relationship. What color sits next to it is going to define that color. Or believe it or not, if it's just sitting on white or gray or black paper, that's a relationship. So we looked at basic color schemes. So your triad, 3 primary colors, and all the combinations of colors that you can create from that. We looked at the spectrum from yellow to red, in this case, a cool to cool, and did the 3 variations, reminding you that, remember, you can push this as long as you can still tell the difference between one and the other. On average, I would recommend really pushing these colors and getting just a practice on how you can mix your colors. And the more colors you can put between 2 colors, the more you're really mastering your color mixing. And the more, think about this, you go from 3, and just by selecting these 3, we immediately created 30. In this case, I only went with 5, but just to go to a scale of 10, you would create 30. And from each of those colors, or those new 30 colors, we then went to create, in this case, we looked at, starting with the base of our value scale, our gray scale, that goes from value 1 to 10, which is full intensity of light. So from white to black, and then place those colors according to their own value. So yellow is the lightest color of these, which is closer to white. But as we saw here, ultramarine blue is almost right next to black in terms of value. So relating it to your value scale, where do the colors belong? And then what can we do with that color? We tinted it towards the white by adding white, or we shaded it by adding black until it becomes black. And notice how far these colors could go when we do that. And then we did a simple exercise where we put that to the test. And we realized that, oh my gosh, look how easy it is to create the illusion of volume and space by just shifting the value of one color, in this case red, and tinting it, and then shading it to create a painting, really. So today we're going to go one step further. And just so you know, we're going to be creating a chart kind of like this. So I'm going to do pretty much the same setup. And we're going to go to the next logical progression. So I'm going to use my ruler, and I'm going to do one by one. So this one, I'm going to use inches. As usual, I'm going to use just 10 inches. Oops, went a little too far. And make these squares 1 inch by 1 inch. You could make them bigger. And remember, you're also going to be practicing your brushing skills. So you could always play with that. Arrange the size that you want to work with, if you want to make it a little bit bigger, or maybe even a little bit smaller. And I'm just going to go ahead and mark 1, 2, 10, 8, 9, 10. Perfect. And just give me a little guide. And we're going to maybe try to create 2 or 3 of these, which would bring us, well, a minimum of 2, of course, at least. Because we're really going to take this just a little bit further. Next step, I'm going to go to my palette And we are going to use a lot of white. And I'm just going to go ahead and use black today because we are going to create a gray. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to pick a color. It could be your favorite color. It could be the color that challenges you most. So I have my reds, blues, yellows. Before I pick one of those, what I want to do is, and this is going to be tricky because you have to work fast. So what I want to do is I want to create 10 grays. And there is one way where you could mix all of them. But remember, because we're working with acrylics, they could dry up on you. So I'm going to be working from white all the way to black. Or you can work from black all the way to white. But what we want to do is make sure we have a good value scale. Just like we did last week, where we showed pretty easy the difference between one to the next and being able to see that this one is darker than this one but lighter than this one, and all the way through be able to tell without too much of a hard look that they are one step, and obviously the nice slow gradient without big jumps in value. And what I want to do to that is, let's see, I'm going to use the color, yellow. And I've been using cadmium yellow too much, so I'm going to go ahead and use the Indian yellow hue. So it's my warm yellow. It may look like an orange to you. So I'm going to have, or a yellow ochre. I'm just going to put a little dab on there. I'm going to grab a chunk of white. And I'm also going to apply a tiny bit of black here. So here's the trick. I'm actually going to keep this right over here. Like that. So you have an idea of what I want to do. Now, what we're going to be working with today is the tone of the color. It's these terms, again, I just throw them out. There's how far you want to go with that terminology. I don't want to confuse you. It's things you need to know just by seeing and knowing how to do it. It's not needing to name them, but knowing what it is. You're going to find it through chroma or tone, the tonality of a color or the chroma of a color. And what that means is we're going to take, I'm actually going to add a little bit of fluid additive to this mix today. Just a couple drops on my palette so it doesn't dry as fast. And this is an acrylic vehicle that is going to help me just give a little fluidity to my acrylics. There we go. Now I want to have paper towels and water by my side. And I'm going to start with black. So the way I organize my palette as well, I want to make sure I have general idea. If I take some black, I'm going to grab a chunk like that. And I come over here and add just a tiny bit of color of this yellow. I want to see how far until I can push it and begin to see that the black is modified. So it's not going to be 100% black. It's going to be the darkest value of the combination of this Indian yellow and black. Now, I don't want to push it too far. And I think I see the change. I hope you guys can see it here too on camera. When I place it on the paper, you're going to see it. It still reads black, but there's, believe it or not, there's a tiny variation to it. And it is warmer. And it is, in this case, our darkest scale. And notice that I did not add any white at all. Because the trick here is, well, he just did a shade of that color. And that is because it's my last and darkest intensity. And I may do something very similar on the other end, where it's going to be opposite. It's going to be almost just pure tint, a white. And there we have it. So I know it reads different, but in a painting, this chroma of this color is going to be beautiful, as opposed to just plain black. So notice that I have this combination going on here. Now, here's the trick. I need to begin to add very small amounts of white to control the gray, the level of gray, and the value of that gray, if I want this to have that nice, slow, step-by-step gradient. And at the same time, I want to control the chroma of the color. So the intensity and the amount of color that I'm going to be adding to it is also going to be huge. Notice that I just added lots of it. So this may force me to use a little more black. If I were to place this right here by the side, it's a shade. That's not what we want. We want to bring this over, and it's just a tiny little touch of white. Now this is one way, and it could be really tricky for you if you've never done this before, where you're saying, well, I'm lost. Now I need to add more black, and now I don't know if I went too far. So here's the other way that I was suggesting. And it may not be easier, I don't know. Unless you try it, then you're going to figure out, yeah, that's easy. So here's what I would do. I would grab a chunk of white, and here's 1, 2, 3, and I could go all the way, 4, 5, all the way to 10. And simultaneously, I would grab a tiny bit of black, mix a gray. Now I could see that this one is extremely light. So I'm going to grab a little bit more, bring it over. And what I want to do is I want to control my grays where I could see, there it is, I could see the value scale shifting. Did you see that? And I may have jumped a little too fast from this one to this one. And what this exercise is all about is you figuring out how to strategize, how to set up yourself for color mixing, how to find yourself, how to be able to see how you're managing the mixture, in this case of chromas, of grays plus your color. Can you see the shifting grays in here? Now, one thing I would absolutely want to do, if you can, would be to double check it with my grayscale. So here you know that this one's definitely on this side. So it's not this one, it may be this one. Most likely it's this one here. Actually, yeah, it's this one. So that would be my value number 2. So let's go back to that one really quick. And knowing that that's my value scale, my value scale number 10, so it's not the lightest, it's the second lightest, I'm going to bring in just a tiny touch of color, my yellow, and I'm going to begin to mix it. And I'm going to try to control value and intensity. The more color I add, the more I'm going to intensify the chroma. And it's also a great way to test how far you can push that. And it takes a lot. And I think that's it right there. So let's go ahead and add it here. And wow, that is beautiful. So you see how it has obviously this nice greenish bias. There's that blue from the black coming in. There's that nice cool white. which keeps this color, which is a very warm yellow. It does hold a little bit of that warmness, but now it's pulling, it's giving me this feeling of cool. And it is still the same yellow. Now, before we move forward, for some of you, maybe, I don't know what we're doing. I don't get it. What are we doing? Very simple. We took black and white. We created a value scale. Then we took a color and we added black to the color and white to the color. So we added white to create the tints. We added black to create the shades. Here, we're adding gray. And we're going to add gradations of gray just like it is following that value scale. So I'm done with this one. It would be really, really tricky for me to add more white and black to create this gray, which you're going to see now. And I'm going to trust. Actually, before I do that, I want to add a little more white because this gray feels like it jumped a little bit too fast from that value 9 to value 8. And there's a little bit of that yellow left over on my brush. So that's going to cause a little bias to it. But I could read it. And that's the one. And I'm going to grab same amounts of color, mix that with this new gray. And I hope you could see that. And you will see it much, much clearer once I bring it over. Can you see what's happening here? Now that's a very, very small shift, but it's there. So controlling how much pigment, how much color you add to the grays is one thing you need to be careful, and controlling the value of your grays. And those two things working together begin to give us this absolutely beautiful. And this puts you at the level of professional painters when you're doing this. In your paintings, if you're bringing these types of colors, these types of chromas, tones, tints and shades, it means you understand. You know your colors. Let's go to the next one. Add a little more white. And what am I looking for right now? I'm looking for value 8. So value 8 has a long way to go. Yeah. So whether you work this way, which I got to tell you, you will get there. You will definitely get there. But it takes understanding what you're doing first. So this is one great way. And if this is too fast for you, I would go ahead and mix 10 grays first. And make sure you have your 10 grays where you could see, yeah, that's it. There's not one that's darker, lighter, and it's in the wrong place. I need to push. Because remember, if one gets lighter, everything else gets darker. So you need that understanding of how am I going to get a range of colors that could be easily pushed or pulled and create a nice uniform or evenly spread value scale. So here we go from 10, 9, 8. This would be number 7. Adding a little flow. So I am adding just a touch more color as I intensify the black, because the black does overpower it. So I need to move to, just to keep this here as well, value 7. We're going to go to value 6 just to get a sense of what that gray should look like. I'm going to continue mixing just enough gray. Now it's going to intensify because I'm adding lots more black or less white. But you want to make sure you have enough paint to just cover your square. Now, I mentioned this before, as I mix my gray, and if I have a gray scale, I could bring it over and dab it on. It needs to be a little bit darker. Once I dab it on and I don't see it, it means I'm dead on. I'm right there. If it's too light or too dark, you will see it. And then you could just wipe it off. If you intensify that color just a little more, now it went a little darker. You could see the dab. So let's bring back a little bit of white. How much? Again, this is the whole purpose of this exercise. For you to kind of play around with it, dance with it, and figure out the moves. Figure out, okay, is this a little or is it too much before you actually do it. Always favor the side of less when you can add more little by little. Don't go too heavy because then you're going to have to pull the colors back. Go with more gray. Your gray is not going to be the same. So little by little until you... And it's a great way that I'm saying this, the way I'm organizing it on my palette. Because this color, when it sits next to this one, it's already telling me you need to add a little more. And it is neutralizing it, just a dab. And bring a little more chroma. And now we bring it over and we see what happens. And when you place that color next to the previous, that's when you really truly see it. And I'm getting a feeling that I'm playing too cautious here. Like, I need to make my jumps just a little bit more obvious. So I'm adding a tiny bit more black and a tiny bit more yellow. And you can do that. Just modify it. That's what it's all about. Managing your palette, going back, adding a color, pulling it from the other side. But I don't want to go too black too fast. Because once we reach a level here, it's going to get really dark. It's going to be hard to tell. And then I don't want to end up with tons of paint that I mixed here, and I'm not going to use all of it just for one square. The more and more paint I add, the more and more paint I waste. But for an exercise like this, it's really helpful to... Where do I start? With the gray. Once I reach that level of gray, and if you mix them all first, do you find your way a little bit easier? Now I know the lighting is not optimal here. I'm going to just turn it a little bit so you could see a slow gradation. And I think it's actually working. For the reason I picked yellow is because it's the lightest color of the three. Blue would be a challenge, and it's actually beautiful. I love red, and when you add the chroma of red, you really get inspired. You want to go paint. You can see what that color, all the things those colors could do. So we go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We're going to go to the opposite, to the shadow side, to number 5. So value number 5 coming up on here. I'm going to start with more black, and now I'm going to add white to it, little by little. And that way I get there faster. So I know this is way off still. We add more white, little by little. So instead of adding black to white, now I'm adding white to black. And this is going to get me there probably just a little bit easier. I think I'm close. Still a little lighter. There we are. That's it. Just one more tiny touch. And I'm anticipating this mixture, these grays getting a lot darker, a lot faster. And some of the white, you got to be careful. Some of that white from the previous grays in your brush lightens that color, that gray, and you find yourself a little bit off. So immediately I see this and love it. And I am very familiar with this color. Believe it or not, when you deal with shadows and you begin to deal with these, instead of shades, with the chromas, especially when you do landscapes, this is one color you really want to be familiar with. And one would think, well, let's go to greens. Notice that I'm working with a yellow, but look at this. And can you see a beautiful landscape coming from a combination of these colors? Absolutely. Now there's a nice, that's the kind of jump that I want to see. It's a little, you could see it clearly. And obviously we're entering the shadow side. So the light shadow in our value scale. Let's move on. Another chunk of black. And we begin to add a little white. Ooh, too much. And what I find is usually when we're mixing this area of the value scale, the tendency is to get, I don't want to say lazy, but shortcutty. Like, it's dark, done. Where you should actually be way more intense in your observation, in your mixing. There it is. And it is one of those steps that really makes or breaks. I really believe it. And you can identify it. And you may not know it, but now when you go to the museum and you see a painting that you love, and if you're looking at how the color was put together, you're going to want to look at tints, shades, chromas, and see what kind of work went into producing, mixing those colors. And then obviously the technique of application. And then want to emulate it. And here where you don't have to worry about anything else but getting the right value, mixing your color, keeping your palette organized. I'm going to need just a little more black. And making it fun. Now, we'd only get to do one color in this class, but I would absolutely encourage you to do it with every single color. And when I mean every single color is not just your favorite colors, but when we talk about every single color, not just yellow, red, blue, you have 2 yellows, 2 reds, 2 blues that make up your palette. You're going to want to mix some of those yellows and reds and blues to make your oranges and greens and violets, and see where this goes. It takes that extra work, that extra level of experimenting and exploring to hit that aha, eureka. This is me. This is my painting. There's the color I want to get really to know better. And this is the way you get there. I can't believe, did I just mix this one in one shot? So we're at value 1, 2, 3. So this is value 3. That was very close. There we are. And let's bring some more yellow. Now remember, it's close to the quantity, but also depending on how much gray I have on there, that's how much yellow I want to bring in. And I would also encourage you to test, hey, what happens if I add less yellow or more yellow to my gray mixture at that value scale? Oh, that's a beautiful color. Or a beautiful chroma of that color. And just to play with that, with the intensities, you're beyond value now. When you begin to look at that. And when you add brush strokes and technique, well, that's when you are flying high. That's a whole different level. And like everything, it takes a little bit of work, but once you get this, it's so intuitive. It is so intuitive that it'll be just natural. You wouldn't even think about it. You'll stop and just strategize. Okay, this one I did get in one shot. Yep. So there it is. There's my value scale number 2. Bring in that little bit of yellow left over, and I still need to do value 10. And I feel like I want to correct my last value here. This is too black for such beautiful value scale that we just put together. So it was supposed to be my starting point to see if I could, but I'm glad I went to the opposite and got a better feel, better sense. And sometimes that happens. It's happened to me a lot, where if I start at this end, everything stays dark, 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 and all of a sudden here, whoops, I just got to rush into light. So the steps, oh, that's what I was going to fix there. And for this last one, I'm just going to add a little more black to this mixture here with a tiny bit of white. Just so the previous way I was mixing before. And there it is. Now, can I keep going darker? This level of intensity here, that's the beauty. When you discover that you could actually paint in the shadows with the variety of colors that you could find in there. It's accelerating. There's that feeling of infinity at your fingertips, because you can manage an infinity of ranges, and it's all up to you when you're coming up with these combinations. So I want to go all the way to value 10 over here, intensity, and I'm going to make a very, very ultra light gray. So lots of white. There's some black paint on this white here. I'm just going to grab that and mix it as a, it's going to look like a tint. So I'm going to make it just one tiny step into the gray. Maybe that was too much. And that's getting to know how your black overpowers your white here, and how to maintain the ratio. And let's see how much of this yellow. There it is. That's exactly what I was looking for. And now we don't have a white. or just a really bright version. With good intensity. And there we have it. Now it's very important to understand the difference. That we're mixing black and white, but it wasn't just white and the color, or black and the color. Black and white in the ratios of gray plus a color are going to create this. It's a neutralizing effect to that color. It brings it from the outer edge of our color wheel towards the middle, towards the grays, obviously, because we're adding gray to it. So there it is. Now imagine this in red, blue, greens, violet, oranges. When you begin to get familiar with this area of the color, of color theory, it should be really, really exciting. And to understand the possibilities that you're going to have. Now we're going to move right into our second exercise. And just to show you the difference here. Oops. Oh gosh. There we are. Notice the shade. Notice the chroma. And obviously we need a tint. So one way I do this, and I'm going to show you a sample with all kinds of colors. I think I showed this one last week, maybe, where I have a color. It's a new color that I added to my palette. And when I do this, I do pretty much a quick study of tint shades and chromas. So this is a cadmium orange. I went a little bit warmer than the deeper yellows that I've been using. So I take it to a tint. But look at the chromas here. And this proves to you, look at all the possibilities of colors that you have. In this case, for figure painting or portrait painting. And you could do that with every color. Every color. So notice that this is all mixtures with grays. And what is a teal color at the top, that becomes all these different beautiful chromas. And then you can have those resources as a reference that are really going to... It's incredible how you could just use them for inspiration. Anytime you're painting, you want to see them, have them somewhere around. And they will provide you with ideas and answers as you're painting. I'm going to go ahead and create another 10-inch. Just the width of the ruler. And I'm going to go ahead and make them 1-inch square. 10 of them as well. You guys are at the advanced level where we need to be working at 10 gradations. Now, if you feel like you want to push it further than 10, that's just for show. 10, 11, that's where you're pushing it. Usually they say between 7 and 10 values or chromas or tints or shades, you're really at a very professional level. And we're talking about painting, any type of painting, watercolor, acrylic, oil, photography, anything that's image related with light and shadows. At 7 to 10, push it up to 11 variations in value, chromas, tints, or shades. You are giving the viewer something really, really rich. And if you know how to contrast them and balance them, then people will stand there for more than 10 seconds in order to take it in. So what are we going to do here? I'm going to use that same color, Indian yellow hue, and we're going to do another variation. And this is got to be the final variation so you could see how this works. So we just use black and white to create that grayscale, to create the chroma and mixture of our color with gray. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take I selected a warm yellow, which begins to read a little more like orange. And you could see how, yep, that's pulling towards the orange. So I'm going to come over to my color wheel. Here's yellow. So this is not that. It begins to be a little more like that, even more like this. So between this one and this one, where are we? Let's go all the way. No, that's but somewhere right about here. So it's orange. In the classification of this color wheel, that is this. So when I take that orange and I go straight across to the opposite side, easy, blue. And it's not a blue violet and not a blue green. It's a blue that is straight opposite. So, knowing that, and depending on the color that you chose, so let's say you chose a red, and it's a warm red or a cool red, you're going to now use the opposite color in your color wheel. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. I'm here to help. And make sure we get this one right. So I'm at orange. I'm going to go straight across. Blue. So it's not an ultramarine blue. It's more of a cobalt blue. It could be a cerulean, but I stick more with the cobalt blue. It's kind of obvious. So there it is. I don't have to do any mixing. I most likely, when I do this, neutralizing a color, you will have to mix your color in order to get the right temperature. Let's put it over here. In order to get the right temperature to neutralize your color for its complementary color. So we're dealing with the complementary color. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take yellow as our first value. I'm going to have to add a little more additive. I like the look. I like how that worked out. Just a few drops right there in the middle. And I'm going to bring just a little bit of this yellow. So it's pure yellow. Nothing mixed with it. This is right out of the tube. Full hue. Full chroma. And I'm just going to fill in this square. And now we're going to go and explore another beautiful area of the color wheel. So what we're going to be doing here is this. In week 1, we started with yellow, and then we selected red. And we mixed the outer edge, the spectrum. What we're going to do now is we're going to go from this end through the color wheel to its opposite. So we're going to go through the middle, meaning we're going to neutralize that color, and we're going to go to the opposite complementary color. So what does that mean? I took this, let's call it what it is, orange. It's a warm yellow. And you saw it here in the name. It's Indian yellow hue, new gamboge, cadmium deep hue. There's all kinds of different variations of yellow pigments that would read more as orange independently. And cobalt blue. So this cobalt is going to be at the opposite end. And with ratios of mixing, we're going to neutralize this color. And what I want you to see is the difference between the colors created. So this is another possibility. Now, if this blue were a little bit cooler or warmer, it would be a completely different outcome. And it's also something interesting that you can manipulate, and certain artists have done that. So what do? I'm going to take a chunk of this yellow, and I'm going to just tap it, and I mean just barely, with the minuscule amount of blue. See if that does anything, because this blue is going to overpower. I'm going to place it here next to it, and you can begin to see that, yep, in a way it's kind of cooling it. And some people would say muddying it. We're going to go through what people call muddy colors, which actually are the most beautiful colors. They're the colors of nature when you think about it. And if you're dealing with, I don't want to say realism, but in a more natural way, you will identify these colors a lot easier than the actual pure hue. It's very rarely seen in this form. You're going to actually identify much, much more with these kinds of chromas, light, shadow, tints, shades, and what we're about to do. So you notice how much I brought in. Let's bring in another chunk, and I'm going to double it. So I want to be careful how fast I go here with adding the complementary color. I want to make sure I gauge and have a good sense. So I have a nice little more. Obviously, we begin to see this getting a little bit greener, but it's simultaneously greener, grayer, and it gives a sensation of browner. Kind of this greenish brown, wouldn't you say? So depending on the color that you're working with, since you were free to choose whatever color you want, your favorite color, and exploring it, hopefully you are in the right section of your color wheel, making sure your complementary color it is important to get a feel for the temperature of it. Notice how it is getting a little bit, just already a little bit richer. So if we were to mix a couple of combinations of these colors here, you could begin to see already, kind of like what we did last week, a little bit of volume to it, a little bit of depth. All these things start coming together. Let's grab another chunk of yellow. A little more blue. Patiently, without pushing it too far. So see, I'm getting the sense that maybe it went a little too far. One way to check it would be, and I'll do it in the next one here, where we're going to go towards blue and not have what I just mentioned earlier happen, which is I go too yellow, and then I reach blue, and I went past the middle point, where then I would have to change everything back. So I am working from the yellow, and I am, in this case, focused on the lighter side of the color. But you could see how it's neutralizing it, how it's affecting it. Just wiping a little bit of that yellow off of the brush, because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to grab a chunk of blue on this side over here, and I'm going to bring in just a tiny bit of yellow to it. So the opposite of what I've been doing, I'm going to do it on the other side. And yikes, it gets very green. But it's I could see immediately it's the perfect neutralizing effect where you could see the contrast. And have you seen how beautiful this could be? It becomes a little bit of that, it has a little scent like a turquoise, the greenish. It could be a rich emerald green. So immediately you have a completely new range of beautiful, beautiful colors in the yellow, red, brown, yellow ochre that are very neutral, that are in beautiful temperature. Where on the opposite side, look at that. And let's see where this goes. Let's pull another chunk of blue. And now we're going to just grab a little more yellow. Grab a little bit more. And you begin to notice, yeah, that blue overpowers. So when you feed one color to the other, you have to do it in less or more, depending on which color is your base, which one's mixing. And now you can begin to see, and this is, it just screams forest. Now you could buy these colors. They sell all these different colors in pre-mixed tubes. But if you really want to have control over your painting, you're going to want to learn how to mix all these variations. And knowing that you can mix any color from just having the right few colors that you need, it's incredible. It's like having a superpower. Let's keep going this way. A little more blue, a little more yellow. And now it's going to mix with that green that's underneath, so it may take a little more and a little more yellow. And this is another way, just pulling a little bit of that color to the side and adding a little less. We begin to see that browning, the grayish effect. And I don't want to see too much of that jump. And now it's going to be a lot easier for me to find that middle ground. And also play a little bit with the technique, the application. Let's go right back to our yellow. All I need to add is a little more right over here at this edge. That way I can pull a little more of that blue-green we have going on here. A little more, just a touch. And see, I can control the ratio. And this is a scale that could really go far. I could see myself going way. Talk about steps. I could probably add double the steps from here to here, where you could still see the jump from one to another. And on this side, you saw how, yeah, I was cautious at the beginning, a lot lighter. But let's see how we deal with this connection here. So I'm going to grab a lot of this yellow here and just mix it pretty much with what's on the brush. And yeah, it's a little too green still. So it needs a little more yellow. Just a little more yellow. Oof. Maybe not that much. So bring in a little more. And now, hopefully you could see how one color, as you mix it, as you manipulate it, you could see how how blue or how yellow it is, any which step. And the idea here is how to identify it from nature or from your subject, and knowing how to get there. So now that I see a color, and by the way, all these colors have names. I go more by pigment. But when we're looking at this green olive or Spanish green olive, or because it's a little more maroon, notice that the richness of these colors. So the difference between neutralized colors with grayscale and complementary, you see how the value, because it's toned down, how it could serve you for pretty much any subject you can think about. And you could do this, again, with any color. I wanted to show you one last thing. Let's see if I could very quickly add one more here. I may not finish it, but just to show you where this could go. Just another one here, 10. And just close them out. Now the beauty of this I have all this color left over. What am I going to do with all this color? I'm going to put it right here in the middle. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Let's put it right here. So I'm taking this color, and I should have mixed a little bit more of it before I went full in. Let's see if I can get to it again. Right about there. So I'm just picking this color here. It's a little bit darker. So it's more like this one. But I'm just placing it here in the middle of the scale. And I think you can guess where I'm going. This new color that we just created, by mixing the two complementaries. By adding just a touch of white, they could also be tinted. They could be shaded. And we could also tone them with grays. So do you begin to get an idea of the power you have here in this palette? Because it is incredible. So I'm just doing a quick mix here. Really loose, just to show you how fast you take one color, and it could be any of these colors. And you can tint them, shade them, tone them to create a whole new value scale. And I'm just using what was left on the brush by adding just a little bit of white, a little bit at a time, and bringing it all the way to this side. And I'm going to go the opposite way with the shade of it by adding just a touch of black. But look at this color. Wow. It's got to be, it should be really exciting to just explore one color, see how far you could take that. And very quickly, I'm going to take this color the opposite way. Just grab a chunk of it and touch it with a tiny bit of black. Too much. Again, managing your palette. My colors are getting a little bit dry here. So I made a little mistake digging in a little too much into that black. But you get the idea. This is another realm of infinite possibilities. There is no other way to put it. And you can do that with every single color we just created. A little bit of white went in there, so this is not going to be exactly a tint. I'm sorry, a shade. It's going to be more of a tone, a chroma. But how quickly and how rich this begins to get. And then we will go all the way to black. Creating a whole new value scale. And there we have it. Just working a little faster, a little more. But there we go. So whatever we call this color, knowing we could just go all the way there. I'm going to go ahead and finish up what I have left here on the palette with this. Oh, no, it dried. Let's see over here. We still have some of this one. Mix a little bit of the blue. Get somewhere near. And let's mix a gray. How dark, how light, we need to know in order to get the value we want. And then we're going to mix that. And you see, the new possibilities. And where that could go. So I hope you see the change, the drastic change really, from here, where we added white, black, to where it becomes gray and it gets lighter or darker as well. So this is the page that I was really waiting for. The build up from week 1 and week 2 all the way to this. And now, as a color theory teacher, I push you out of the nest with those wings spread wide and see how far, and very, very far. Hopefully you will create lots and lots more of these charts, exploring those colors. There is no easier way than to push yourself and come up with ways to rationalize it to, okay, how do I want to understand it? And plan it out small. See where you're going to place your white, black. Once again, I'll show you these for reference. How it's a grayscale with one color, and then you darken it in terms of value and intensify it in terms of chroma as you go this direction. Here's another where I was just looking for skin tones. And this is that same cadmium orange. So here's my cadmium orange. And it's a mix with cerulean blue. So it's basically what we did here today with orange to blue. But it's a different type of mix where we're going to get a little more skin tone. And then tint them. Just tints of this color, of this, just 2 colors mixing. And in this case, it's ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, and then to see the tints. This, when I have questions, here's all my answers. And finally, one more. Here we have a triad, which is cadmium yellow, cobalt blue, and pyrrole red, which is a warm red. The mixture of these two gives me this one, this green. The mixture of these two gives me this orange. And the mixture of these two gives me this, looks black, but it's purple, deep purple. And then I continued mixing these to give me this, and these to give me this, and so on and so forth. The ones you see lighter are tints. The ones you see darker are shades of these new colors. And these I use for backgrounds. Just when I do somewhat of abstract blurred backgrounds, this is what I use. That's the color combinations that I want to explore in order for me to look at what actually works for what you're looking for. And in each case, it's going to be a little different. So there's all your answers. So you reach out for these, and immediately it points you to the right direction. So there we have it. Color matters, and oh boy, does it matter. I hope you guys enjoyed it.